This, this hearing will come to order. Today we have an opportunity to take another step toward reigniting President Trump's blue-collar comeback. That starts with confirming the four well-qualified nominees before us today: Paul Atkins, Jonathan Gould, Luke Pettit, and Marcus Molinaro. While the title of this committee is the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, I view our work as all-encompassing. It's our responsibility to solve the kitchen table problems and issues that are causing so much anxiety for hardworking American families. The issues we oversee: housing affordability, increasing access to capital, and bolstering our economic national security, impact everyone's wallets and their pocketbooks. The Biden administration stifled innovation and economic growth through its heavy-handed ideological approach to regulation. Nowhere was this clearer than the SEC under Chair Gary Gensler. Paul Atkins, President Trump's nominee to lead the SEC, has the experience necessary to return the SEC to its core mission. Mr. Atkins is a former SEC commissioner who has dedicated his career to ensuring that our capital markets remain the envy of the world. He will roll back the Biden administration's disastrous policies. He will promote capital formation and retail investment opportunities and provide long overdue clarity for digital assets, ensuring that American innovation does not fall further behind. And frankly, let's reverse it and become the envy of the world there too. I look forward to working with Mr. Atkins to open our capital markets to all Americans through my legislation, the Empowering Main Street in America Act. My bill will improve access to capital for entrepreneurs nationwide, right-sized regulations for small and newly public companies, and create new avenues for hardworking Americans to invest in their own communities. Next, we have Jonathan Gould, who was nominated as the Comptroller of the Currency. Mr. Gould is no stranger to the OCC. He has firsthand experience at the agency. He understands its critical mission, ensuring the safety and soundness of our banking system and ensuring banks provide fair access to financial services, not pushing a far-left political agenda. First, under President Obama, we saw Operation Choke Point. Then under President Biden, regulators weaponized their authority to debank politically disfavored industries and individuals, and most recently, the crypto firms, and what we now call Choke Point 2.0. Mr. Gould, I hope you will end debanking and return the OCC to its true purpose: chartering and supervising banks to ensure they serve all credit-worthy customers, not just those who fit a particular mold. Before I continue, let me thank Rodney Hood, the acting OCC comptroller of the OCC. He's done a great job, formed a foundation that is strong, common sense, pro-growth reforms that we need to return. Notably, Mr. Hood has removed references to reputational risk consistent with my Firm Act from the OCC bank examination guidance and instructed examiners to no longer examine for reputational risk. Luke Pettit, nominated to be the Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Financial Institutions, brings key experience to this role, including serving on this committee. Mr. Pettit understands the challenges facing American families and businesses, and he knows how to build consensus and compromise when necessary to solve tough financial policy issues. Finally, former Congressmember Marcus Molinaro, nominated for Federal Transit Administration, brings critical experience from his time in the House on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and a long career in local government, which I really appreciate, making him well qualified for this role. His experience as Dutchess County's executive reinforced his belief that transit and infrastructure challenges require local solutions and oversight. I am confident that he will propose common sense, pragmatic solutions to the agency ensure that our mass transit is effective and safe, and connect communities with new opportunities, especially new housing opportunities for all Americans. By confirming these nominees, we can unleash a golden age of prosperity, where families can once again afford to buy a home, save for their future, and achieve the American dream. Let's get to work. Let's get these noms confirmed, and let's make America great again. Thank you, Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have another jam-packed panel of critically important regulators to consider today, and only 80 seconds per nominee to question each of them. I believe we need more time, longer question periods and multiple rounds of questions, but since that's not happening, I'll just jump right in. Co-presidents Trump and Musk are in the midst of a dangerous purge of the federal government. They've shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They've laid off or bought out thousands of other financial regulators. And just last week, they tried to handcuff the Federal Trade Commission by attempting to fire the two Democratic commissioners. This is plainly illegal, and if it's allowed to stand, it will do grave damage to millions of families that will get scammed, all for the benefit of Donald Trump's campaign donors. Why are they trying to dismantle the federal government? Well, Elon Musk gave us one really good example. He said that he intends for his new company, X Money, to, quote, become half of the global financial system. When financial regulators like the CFPB and the FTC enforce the law, Elon could be stopped cold. And that's why President Trump, Elon Musk, and the Doge team are taking a chainsaw to the people in government who enforce the laws. They want to make themselves even richer and more powerful. So apart from the bread and butter policy questions I'd have for these nominees under normal circumstances, I have very serious concerns about their willingness to aid and abet illegal ransacking of our government. Mr. Molinaro, if confirmed, you will serve as the head of the Federal Transit Administration. I know you believe in the mission of the agency that you want to lead. In our conversation, you promised to advocate within the administration for public transportation, and you pledged to advocate for the FTA's career staff and frontline workers at our transit agencies. We need a strong FTA that can deliver projects on time so riders in Boston and Charleston and in your hometown or home county, Dutchess County, have better, safer service. Mr. Pettit, you have been nominated to be the Assistant Treasury Secretary for Financial Institutions, which is responsible for coordinating financial, regulatory, and consumer policy, monitoring the insurance market, and protecting critical financial infrastructure. I am concerned that you intend to support the Trump administration's next round of big bank deregulation and bailouts, while Elon Musk's Doge tightens its grip on the Treasury Department. Mr. Gould, you would serve as the controller of the currency, which is responsible for ensuring the safety and soundness of the national banking system and supervising some of the biggest banks in the country. Unfortunately, your track record, including as chief counsel of the OCC during the first Trump administration and as a lawyer for the big banks, suggests that you may see this new role as a new perch to help out your Wall Street friends by further weakening bank regulations and by letting big banks off the hook when they violate the law. And then there's Mr. Atkins, who is the nominee to be chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It is the SEC's job to ensure that our capital markets remain an engine for economic growth and innovation. That requires stamping out fraud and self-dealing in our markets so that giant corporations don't scam average investors out of their retirement savings. Mr. Atkins has spent almost his entire career helping billionaire CEOs like Sam Bankman-Fried, who committed one of the biggest financial frauds in U.S. history as the CEO of the failed crypto platform FTX. He's been working with those folks to help them get even richer. In the 6 years that Mr. Atkins wasn't making millions of dollars off clients like Sam Bankman-Fried, he was a commissioner at the SEC in the lead up to the 2008 financial crash, when he voted to loosen the reins on big investment banks like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. Mr. Atkins has an almost perfect track record. He got pretty much everything wrong in the run-up to the biggest financial crash since the Great Depression. That is not a record that deserves promotion. We have a lot of ground to cover today, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready.
Senator Crable, you are now recognized to introduce our next nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my honor to introduce Jonathan Gould, President Trump's nominee to serve as Comptroller of the Currency. Jonathan has spent nearly 24 years in the financial services industry, including serving as my chief counsel when I was the chairman of this committee. From 2018 to 2021, he served as the OCC's Senior Deputy Comptroller and Chief Counsel, where he led the law and licensing departments, played a significant role in managing the entire agency, and oversaw the implementation of the Economic Growth Act of 2018. In addition to public service, he's significant private sector experience as a consultant and lawyer, as recently as at the law firm of Jones Day, which will give him valuable perspective when considering the cost of potential rules. And in addition to this impressive background, Jonathan is also well-liked and respected by colleagues and has the demeanor and character to be an effective comptroller. President Trump made an excellent choice in selecting him for this position, and I look forward to supporting his nomination.
Senator Hagerty, you're recognized for a nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a great honor for me to be with such a wonderful group of nominees today. I have a particular pleasure today, though, to introduce a longtime friend of mine. We're roommates in law school.
All right.
Actually, when I talked with President Trump about Paul when he was considering his nomination, I begged him not to hold that against Paul, and he certainly didn't. But as I said, I've known him for a very long time. And since before I met Paul, I knew about him, and he's been known forever for his character, for his intellect, and his unrelenting work ethic. Today, those qualities are going to serve the American people exceptionally well. Even given the many years of private practice and his prior service as an SEC commissioner, Paul has developed an unmatched understanding of financial markets and their regulatory challenges. And I've known Paul not only as a friend, but as a client, because I've called Paul and his team in to help the companies that I've invested in navigate some of the great challenges of the financial services regulatory environment. And his skill has been unwavering. Paul knows better than anyone that our nation's global competitiveness fundamentally rests on the strength of our capital markets. He's a true public servant and a great American. And if you have the opportunity to meet his three sons, two of them are here today, that he and Sarah have raised together, you'll know that Paul is a man of the highest caliber and character. Our nation deserves a man of Paul's caliber steering the SEC. I urge all my colleagues to support his confirmation. Thank you.
Senator Britt?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and all of my colleagues here on the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce an exceptional nominee for the Federal Transit Administrator and my friend, Mark Molinaro. As chair of the Subcommittee on Housing, Transportation, and Community Development with jurisdiction over the Federal Transit Administration, I am particularly honored to welcome you to this committee today. I want to thank you for your willingness to serve and oversee so many important issues. Mark brings to this role a rare blend of executive experience, bipartisan leadership, and an unwavering commitment to public service. Given his experiences, Mark possesses the essential qualities for this role: a proven ability to build consensus on both sides of the aisle, and a strong understanding of the complex transportation policy, both at federal and local levels. As a former county executive of Dutchess County, New York, and as a member of Congress, he has demonstrated time and again how to deliver real results for communities, both urban and rural. Mark understands that transit isn't just about buses and rail lines, that it's about connecting Americans to opportunity and ultimately helping them achieve their American dream. He also knows firsthand the importance of making thoughtful and effective investments in infrastructure, that supporting economic growth and enhancing the lives of everyday Americans and working families should be the priority. I am confident that under Mark's leadership, the Federal Transit Administration will prioritize safety, innovation, and accountability, and will ensure that the transit infrastructure serves all Americans. It is my honor to introduce Mark Molinaro today, and I urge this committee to confirm his nomination.
Senator Haggerty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I hope everybody that is sitting along the walls here today takes special note, because all of the staff does such a wonderful job of supporting our efforts. And today, it's my great privilege to introduce one of my staff, someone who I think the world of, Luke Pettit. For more than 3 years, Luke has been an indispensable member of my staff, and on so many levels, he's not only been a great advisor, but a wonderful friend. His service at the Federal Reserve and in the United States Senate has given him a deep understanding of financial institutions and of our policies. To unlock our economy's full potential, we need leaders who will maximize the competitiveness of our financial system. For this task, there is no one better suited than Luke Pettit. Beyond his many qualifications, Luke is a leader in the truest sense. And Luke, from a very personal level, I want to thank you for the leadership that you provided to my sons. They think this guy walks on water.
Wow.
He's admired not merely for what he knows, but for how he carries himself. He carries himself with humility, with selfless dedication to the mission at hand. This kind of leadership is exactly what our government needs. Luke will bring his exceptional commitment and capability to the role that he's being brought before this committee for today, and I urge my colleagues to support his confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Haggerty. Will the nominees please stand? I'll swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Do you agree to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Senate? Thank you very much. You may be seated. Your written statements will be made part of the record in its entirety. Please keep your oral comments to 5 minutes, and I will hold all of us to 5 minutes as well. So if you hear a tapping, it will only get louder if you're over 5 minutes. I yield mine back. Well, he yields his back. Good example. Thank you very much. We'll start with Mr. Atkins. You are recognized for your 5 minutes. Hit your microphone button as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today as President Trump's nominee to be chairman of the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. I've greatly enjoyed meeting with many of you and your staff over the past few weeks, hearing your priorities for the SEC and the United States financial markets. I look forward to working with the members of this committee to pursue the SEC's three-part mission: protecting investors, maintaining fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitating capital formation. And I need to thank Senator Haggerty for those warm and generous words of introduction, and he summarized some of the things that I've done at the SEC and elsewhere, so thank you very much. I'm grateful to my family members here today: Sarah, my dear wife of 35 years, and my sons Stuart and Henry. And I cannot leave out my third son, Peter, who's watching this hearing from the West Coast. Senate confirmation and public service are not without challenges, and I greatly appreciate their encouragement, love, and support.
To President Trump, thank you very much for the trust and confidence that you're placing in me to lead this agency. With my fellow commissioners and members of this committee and SEC staff, I look forward to working to ensure that the United States is well positioned to seize on the new excitement for investment and economic opportunity that President Trump's leadership and pro-growth policies have inspired. I'm fortunate to have served previously at the SEC, first on the staff of Chairman Richard Breeden as an attorney fellow and ultimately as chief of staff. I then served as counselor to Chairman Arthur Levitt after his appointment by President Clinton. From 2002 to 2008, I was honored to serve as an SEC commissioner. In that time, I advocated for greater transparency at the agency and emphasized robust cost-benefit analysis when considering new regulations. I thoroughly enjoyed working with my fellow commissioners and staff and to tackle those difficult challenges. After my term at the SEC concluded just before the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008, the Senate called me back to serve on the Congressional Oversight Panel for TARP, where I had the pleasure to work with then Chair and now Senator and Ranking Member Warren during a very crucial time. In the private sector, I'm CEO of Potomac Global Partners, a 70-person strategy, risk management, and compliance consultancy with people in New York, Chicago, Tokyo, and Washington. My time in public service and in the private sector has allowed me to see firsthand how regulations, including those of the SEC, affect markets and investors. They can stoke innovation, facilitate investment goals, and create opportunities or burdens on businesses' ability to compete and serve their customers. Implementation of regulations, therefore, is crucial. It's one thing to write a regulation, quite another for it to achieve its intended goal. Regulation ideally should be smart, effective, and appropriately tailored within the confines of the regulator's statutory authority. In short, clear rules of the road benefit all market participants. Unfortunately, lawyers do not speak the same language as business people or compliance professionals or IT staff. It takes knowledge and experience to translate and anticipate the issues that inevitably arise among these various professionals tasked with implementing regulations appropriately and effectively. The breadth and depth of my combined experiences over the past decades will inform my approach if I am fortunate enough to be confirmed by the Senate. It takes industry experience and focused application to ensure that customers and investors of financial services firms benefit from efficient, effective, and well-designed regulation. Our goal at the SEC should be to facilitate those efforts, analyze their effectiveness, and then use our enforcement power, if necessary, to cure and rectify wayward actions. Since 2017, I've led industry efforts to develop best practices for the digital asset industry. I've seen how ambiguous and non-existent regulation of digital assets create uncertainty in the market and inhibit innovation. A top priority of my chairmanship will be to work with my fellow commissioners in Congress to provide a firm regulatory foundation for digital assets through a rational, coherent, and principled approach. So this is a pivotal moment for our economy. Entrepreneurs, businesses, and individuals here at home and across the globe are eager to invest in America now that President Trump is at the helm. Yet the current regulatory environment for our financial system inhibits investment and often punishes success. Unclear, overly politicized, complicated, and burdensome regulations are stifling capital formation, while American investors are flooded with disclosures that do the opposite of helping them understand the true risks of an investment. It is time to reset priorities and return common sense to the SEC. I'm eager to get to work for American markets and investors. Should I be confirmed, my goal will be to ensure that the United States is the best and most secure place in the world to do business, and for Americans to invest their hard-earned dollars to save and provide for their future. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Gould, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee. And thank you, Senator Crapo, for the very kind introduction. It is an honor to appear before you today as President Trump's nominee for Comptroller of the Currency. I am grateful to the President and to Secretary Bessent for their trust and confidence. If confirmed, I look forward to advancing the President's commitment to broad and sustained economic growth. I would like to thank my family and friends for their support throughout this process, and I especially thank my wife, Piper, and my sons, Christopher, Timothy, and Thomas, for their love and patience. It is a pleasure to be back in this hearing room. It has been 19 years since I last sat before the members of this committee. I was counsel for then Chairman Richard Shelby, and the committee was marking up a banking bill that would ultimately become law. My job was to respond to any member questions about the bill's provisions or proposed amendments. I remember distinctly the awe I felt sitting before this committee. I feel the same way today. I am here because I believe in President Lincoln's vision of a national banking system and in the agency that has made that vision a reality over its 162-year history. The OCC charters banks, implements the regulatory framework in which they operate, and ensures their safety and soundness, all within parameters set by Congress. The national banking system is today one of the crown jewels of American finance, but neither it nor its continued relevance should be taken for granted. Nor should we ever forget that this system exists not for itself, but rather to support the U.S. economy and the financial aspirations of all of us that constitute it, from the entrepreneur seeking to open a bank account to the large U.S. corporation hedging its interest rate risk. If banks are to serve their role supporting the U.S. economy, they must be allowed to engage in prudent risk-taking. But in the years since 2008, bank regulators have at times tried to eliminate rather than manage risk, frustrating the ability of banks to fulfill their function. This blinkered approach to risk management has implications for the cost and availability of credit, the system's ability to absorb shocks, and its adoption of new technologies and embrace of innovation. I have spent my entire professional career and half of my life studying, implementing, or advising on financial services regulation as a lawyer, Senate staffer, consultant, and regulator. I have twice served as a lawyer for this committee, both before and after the 2008 financial crisis, including most recently as its chief counsel under then Chairman Crapo. In these roles, I assisted the committee in its important oversight of the agency I have now been nominated to lead. As the OCC's Senior Deputy Comptroller and Chief Counsel, I served under 4 different agency heads, spanning the first Trump and Biden administrations. I led the OCC's efforts to implement one of this committee's most significant pieces of recent banking legislation, the Economic Growth Act of 2018 and the regulatory tailoring it required. And I have been tested in crisis management, helping to keep our financial system operating during the COVID-19-induced shutdown of our economy. My time in the private sector advising firms on regulation and risk management will also be an asset to the OCC, should I be confirmed. Seeing the real-world impact that regulations have on financial services firms of all types and sizes is useful perspective for any would-be regulator. If confirmed to lead the OCC, my top priorities will be ensuring national banks support our economy, depoliticizing the banking system, improving bank supervision, and embracing innovation within the agency and the banking system. I will do everything in my power to ensure the continued relevance of our national banking system and its ability to support our national economy consistent with the President's vision. Thank you for your time today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Please, everybody follow his direction. Well done. Mr. Pettit?
Thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and the distinguished members of this committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'd also like to thank all of your staff, many of which I've had the pleasure of calling my colleagues over the past 4 years. And I'd like to thank Senator Hagerty for the opportunity over the last 3 years to serve this body and this country. It's a profound honor to be nominated for this position, and I'm grateful to President Trump and Secretary Bessent for the faith that they've placed in me to carry out the important duties of this role. I would not be here today if it weren't for the support of my family, several of whom are here today. I'm blessed to have the support of my parents, John and Andrea, and my brothers, Mark and Matthew. From an early age, my parents' experiences instilled in me a deep appreciation for the vast opportunities that are unique to this nation. My mother was born in St. Kitts and Nevis, just a few miles away from where our first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, grew up. She immigrated to America at age 21, opening doors to opportunities that would never have been possible in any other country. My father grew up on a turkey farm in rural Washington state, and his father's family was able to persevere and rebuild after they lost everything during the Great Depression in Appalachia. With this deep appreciation of the opportunities that this country gave them, they raised 3 kids, all of whom heeded the call of public service. My own public service began at the Federal Reserve, where I worked both on supervisory and monetary policy matters. After a brief stint in the private sector, I joined the Senate, first as Senator Toomey's committee economist here on the Banking Committee, and now as Senator Hagerty's senior policy advisor. These experiences taught me a lesson. Our financial system in the abstract may drive investment and economic growth, but in the truest and most important sense, the financial system supports the lives of all Americans and their means for pursuing the American dream. From buying a home or starting a business to accessing credit and saving for retirement, a stable and sound financial system ensures that every individual can build their future and a future for their families. The Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Financial Institutions carries the important responsibility of promoting the strength of the financial sector that makes all of this possible. And this is not a responsibility that I take lightly. This role also involves guiding Treasury's efforts in critical areas such as financial education, community development, and cybersecurity. As is the case in my current role here in the Senate, it requires balancing the diverse interests of financial institutions, both small and large, but above all, ensuring that the interests of the American people are put first. If confirmed, I will work alongside the members of this committee to uphold the safety and soundness of our financial institutions and support a financial sector that fosters economic growth, freedom, and opportunity for all Americans. Thank you once again for the privilege of appearing before you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. You guys are on a roll here. Mr. Molinaro?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a high standard to meet, less than 2 minutes. Chairman
Hard for Congress members, even harder for senators. So,
indeed.
No,
Reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, members of the committee, and Senator Britt, thank you for your kind words. It's a true honor to be here with you today, and I'm grateful to you and your staff for the time you've extended me. I'm honored and humbled to appear before you today as President Trump's nominee for Federal Transit Administrator. I'm grateful to the President for his trust in me and to Secretary Sean Duffy for his confidence in my leadership. I'd also like to thank each of you, Republican and Democrat, for your service to this country and commitment to a stronger, more connected America. Public service, as you know, has been the work of my life. I've had the privilege of serving at every level of government, local, county, state, and federal. From village mayor to member of Congress, I've worked to build consensus, bridge divides, and deliver solutions that matter to people. As county executive, I led through crisis and managed complex budgets and embraced accountability, not for its own sake, but to ensure we honor the trust the taxpayers place in each of us. I've also learned that local decision-making does indeed matter, and one size rarely fits all. I'm joined today by my son, Jack, and wish to extend my love and appreciation to my wife, Corinne, and our children, Abigail, Elias, and Theo. They all sacrifice much more, as you know, than they should, so that I might serve. And I do indeed love them much. Transit is more than a system of buses, ferries, and rails. It is the shared circulatory system of our economy. It connects rural towns and big cities, creates opportunities, and drives growth. It revitalizes the centers of community while giving Americans, from students to seniors, veterans to working parents, the freedom to move, thrive, and succeed. And to meet these challenges and tomorrow's demands, and transit must embrace technology, modernize systems, and leverage investment in housing, commercial, and overall economic development. We must make use of data to improve reliability, enhance safety, and innovation to better serve riders and communities. And to fully realize this vision, we must drive innovation, streamline permitting, boost performance, and fully harness technology to transform how we plan, build, and operate transit. A modern, safe, reliable, and accessible transit system in urban centers and rural communities, underground, over roads, and across waterways will advance America and Americans. In my career, I've had the privilege of focusing on creating opportunities for individuals with disabilities. As Dutchess County Executive, our Think Differently initiative, launched in 2015, changed how government serves people, not through rhetoric, but through action. And we made universal accessibility a core value. And if confirmed, that same commitment to those with physical, developmental, and intellectual disabilities will shape every aspect of my work at the FTA, and for daughters like my own and the millions of Americans just like her. As you know, transit depends on people. Each agency's operators, engineers, maintenance crews, dispatchers, and custodians who keep America moving. Their dedication deserves our respect, our investment, and a seat at the table. I value the work of the unions that represent them and see them as partners in building a system that is safer, more efficient, and future-ready. I wish to thank my good friend John Samuelson, the president of the Transport Workers Union, for his support and for being here with me today. I sense him looming over my right shoulder. Let me also recognize the great professionals at the Federal Transit Administration. Indeed, Senator Warren, their expertise and dedication are essential to this mission, and I look forward to working alongside them to deliver results for the American people. If confirmed, I will advance President Trump's bold America First agenda for rebuilding our infrastructure and seek to meet Secretary Duffy's high standard for leadership, innovation, and accountability. I will work with each of you, regardless of party, to help build transit systems that deliver for riders, for workers, for taxpayers, and for the communities we all serve. We are indeed at a great moment of possibility, a golden age. Together, we can ensure that transit not only moves Americans, but helps to move America forward. And just as our own circulatory system connects every part of the body to sustain life, transit binds our communities together, urban and rural, coastal and heartland, ensuring opportunity, access, and resilience flows to every corner of our nation. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. Look forward to your questions, and with the honor of confirmation, getting to work.
Thank you, Congressmember. Really well done.
Thank you, sir.
Even with the senator's interruption. Fantastic. That counts against my time. Thank you very much. Mr. Atkins, you just heard the congressman talk about the golden age, and certainly we're looking for the golden age. The one thing I can say about the SEC is under your predecessor, there was no golden age. The SEC suffered a series of damaging losses as an agency. It saw multiple rulemakings overturned in court, had staff attorneys sanctioned for gross abuse of their power by a federal judge in the debt box case, and experienced its highest attrition rate in over a decade. As SEC chair, how can the SEC recover from these losses and return to its core capabilities as an agency?
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I agree with you. I think all of those issues that you raised are very disturbing, and I, commit to get to work, if I'm confirmed, to try to make sure that we increase the morale of the agency, that we cure some of the dysfunction that's there, the demoralization of it, and get back to work and get back to basics, back to its mission.
That's very important. Mr. Atkins, I'll continue with you. As you know, it has long been a priority of mine, this committee, and frankly, the Trump administration, to end the practice of debanking. This Congress, the Banking Committee, has focused on responding to Operation Choke Point 2.0, where the Biden administration's financial regulators reportedly pressured banks to avoid offering services to the crypto industry. As SEC chairman, will you work to ensure that everyone who wishes to play by the rules, including those in the crypto industry, will be treated fairly?
Absolutely.
Mr. Gould, a few weeks ago, I introduced the FIRM Act, which would eliminate reputational risk from the consideration in bank examination. And 2 weeks ago, that bill passed out of this committee. Then just last week, the OCC acting comptroller Hood took the step to proactively remove reputational risk from the comptroller's handbook booklets and other OCC guidance, and instructed OCC examiners that they should no longer examine for reputational risk. Do you support the acting comptroller's decision to remove references to reputational risk?
I do, Senator.
Thank you, sir. If confirmed, what other steps would you take, if any, to end debanking and more generally the politicization of federal banking agencies?
Senator, thank you very much for that question. I think it is unacceptable for banks or regulators to discriminate on customers on the basis of the customer's politics or religion or the mere fact that they are engaged in a lawful activity that is, for whatever reason, politically disfavored. So I applaud the committee's efforts to shine a spotlight on what has been going on for a while. These are issues, Senator, with which I have been working since 2018 when I was a lawyer for this committee. And I commit, Senator, to you and to the committee to continue to support your oversight efforts, as well as to use the OCC's full powers, consistent with its statutory mission with law, to do whatever I can, if confirmed, to shine a spotlight on these activities and ensure that they are not allowed within the banking system.
Thank you very much. One last question for you. As a top priority for me, this committee and the Trump administration to foster digital asset innovation so that the U.S. can become the crypto capital of the world. In rescinding Interpretive Letter 1179, Acting Comptroller Hood took a crucial step in rolling back guidance at the OCC that limited crypto companies' access to the U.S. banking system. Are you supportive of this effort to foster innovation in the U.S.? And if confirmed as Comptroller, what role do you envision the OCC continuing to play in allowing digital asset innovation?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I believe that many of these activities are clearly legally permissible, and I would hope, if confirmed as Comptroller, to engage on the hard work of determining ways constructively in which these activities that are lawful can be done within the system in a safe and sound fashion. I would hope that over the last 4 years, the agency, that is the OCC, Senator, has gotten some experience with respect to these assets, and so we'll be prepared to ensure supervision in a safe and sound manner going forward.
Thank you very much. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Atkins, you served as an SEC commissioner from 2002 to 2008, the lead up to the 2008 financial crash that crashed the markets, cost 10 million families their homes, and cost millions more their jobs. Your job was to spot and head off risks that were building up in financial markets, but you showed staggeringly bad judgment. I just have a few examples since we're limited on time. In 2004, when Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns asked the SEC to allow them to reduce their capital buffer by 40%, you said yes and voted to weaken the rules on investment banks. In August of 2007, after what was then, quote, the worst week for the American stock market in nearly 50 years, or 5 years, you bragged that, quote, principles of regulatory restraint have been affirmed as the market has continued to demonstrate a capacity to minimize and absorb systemic risk. Worst week, and you said, great, it shows how strong we are. And then days after Bear Stearns' collapse in March of 2008, you made fun of people who thought we needed stronger financial regulations, claiming they were, quote, wallowing in a period of irrational pessimism. And you said that, quote, regulators must not stand in the way of investors and market participants sorting this situation out. Yeah, it sorted itself out with the biggest crash since the Great Depression. So, simple question, Mr. Atkins, were you wrong?
Senator Warren, there are many, as we saw on the Congressional Oversight Panel for TARP, there were many causes for the problems there with that subprime mortgage crisis.
Yeah, but I'm asking about whether you
Fannie
were
Mae.
wrong about deregulation.
No, I don't believe so. I think that was
Well, you know, both the SEC Inspector General and the Bipartisan Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission said that the SEC's deregulation of investment banks contributed to the crisis. If you haven't done it yet, I recommend that you read this, Mr. Atkins. Look, this job is about judgment. And holding up on your resume that you were one of the people on the job to exercise judgment in the run-up to the biggest crash since the Great Depression, and now your hindsight is not 20/20, it's 20/0. You still say that weakening those regulations didn't have anything to do with that crash. I really hope you will read the bipartisan analysis that says otherwise, because it's very dangerous to have you in charge of the SEC. Now, one of my other top concerns about your nomination, Mr. Atkins, is that your judgment will be influenced by more than an objective assessment of the data in front of you. After your stint as an SEC commissioner, you founded a consulting firm called Potomac Global Partners, Potomac counts every time a kind of financial firm subject to the SEC's rules among its clients: banks, asset managers, brokers, exchanges, fintechs, and crypto companies. Your clients pay you north of $1,200 an hour for advice on how to influence regulators like the SEC, and if you're confirmed, you will be in a prime spot to deliver for all those clients who've been paying you millions of dollars for years. So, Mr. Atkins, given how breathtaking your financial conflicts of interest are, I sent you a letter requesting that you commit to a higher standard of government ethics. Slow down the revolving door here. Several major financial regulators in the previous administration agreed to these higher standards, but you sent me a response 10 minutes before this hearing started saying, no, you think you've done enough. That is deeply concerning to me. But let's focus on just getting one thing straight. Your consulting company is estimated to be worth about $50 million. Will you at least disclose, you've said that you will sell it if you are confirmed, will you disclose who the buyers are and how much they pay so that we can make certain that these are not people who are just buying access to the future chair of the SEC?
Senator Warren, I have abided by the Office of Government Ethics.
I have a question
process.
about selling Potomac Partners. It's an easy
I will
yes or no.
abide by the process.
So is that a no? You're
It
not
is
going to tell us
certified-
who
they
you
have
sell it to
certified-
and how much money you get to people who will have business in front of the SEC. You know, some people might call that a pre-bribe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Atkins, I want to give you a chance to respond to that. I actually think that the 2008 crisis had many root causes. You got a minute to explain that.
Well, thank you, Senator Tillis. You're right, exactly. It does. And if you read these reports that came out that Senator Warren referenced, you see the whole panoply of it. But what really troubles me is that Congress still has yet to address the real root cause, and that was the subprime mortgage crisis caused by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and their activities.
And how did that happen? What was the root cause of that?
Well, they basically threw caution to the wind. And when we talk about regulation, those two agencies, really stoked the fires, and then the Fed. And I mean, it's.
I think in some respects we led certain consumers to the slaughter as a result of our inaction. I'm glad to see you agree with that. Okay, I gave you a minute. Mr. Pettit, there are some people who have suggested that Senate Bill 2155 and regulatory tailoring was the reason why Silicon Valley Bank failed. I, for one, think that Senate Bill 2155 needs to be re-implemented. I believe Silicon Valley Bank failed because they had unique activities that you can't find, maybe with the exception of one or two banks that were doing what they were doing. It was their risk portfolio. Tell me a little bit about how and Mr. Gould, I want you to chime in after Mr. Pettit, but tell me what we should be doing with respect to recovering from Silicon Valley Bank's failure, and to what extent should we use Senate Bill 2155 to provide the kind of relief and regulatory framework that small community banks and smaller banks need. Mr. Gould, you can follow just after Mr. Pettit.
Thank you, Senator. SVB's failure was a managerial and supervisory failure, not a regulatory or legislative one. And I think what it should inform us is to reassess the resource deployment that these on-site teams have been engaged in. No part of 2155 instructed SVB to assign SVB's regulators to assign the highest liquidity ratings to the firm.
Do you agree with me that the examiners on that account should be fired? It was just malpractice, and you can keep on, but I want you to cover that too.
Absolutely. So they were asleep at the wheel, full stop. And I think they not only did they rate SVB's liquidity at the highest rating, they overlooked their internal liquidity stress test failures at the firm.
Not to mention all the outstanding MRIAs and everything else that the supervisors just chose not to really press, I guess.
Yes, sir. That's the lesson we should be taking, and we should be reassessing how these on-site teams engage in their supervision on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Mr. Gould.
I agree with Mr. Pettit's comments. I would note just generally, sir, and this is one of the reasons why I think we really need to focus on improving bank supervision, is that there seems to have just been a failure to focus on the material financial risks embedded with that bank's balance sheet and its unique business model. I mean, this is risk management 101, and the fact that it was overlooked by both the California regulator and the San Francisco Fed, is really deeply disturbing, Senator.
I want to talk briefly with you in my time remaining having to do with reputational risk. I was pleased to see that Acting Comptroller Hood struck all references to reputational risk from the OCC's respective handbooks on bank supervision and large bank supervision. Will you commit that no future guidance, directives, whether formal or informal, exist at the OCC related to reputational risk from SR 20 or 9551?
Yes, sir. I think too often reputation risk is used as a pretext for other motives, and I think the regulators have at their disposal other forms of more easily quantifiable and just better understood, more precise, more objective terms, including litigation risk, BSA, AML compliance risk.
I think it is rich to think that some government examiner or supervisor could go into a publicly traded banking institution and judge what they think their activities are appropriate or not appropriate based on reputational risk. Reputational risk is foundational to an organization's reputation and longevity. And to think that somebody from the outside should be guessing that is just absurd to me. It really strikes me as somebody who's probably never worked a day in business. So I appreciate your answer. Mr. Molinaro, I'm out of time. I just want to let you and all of you know I look forward to supporting your confirmations. And to the two former staffers, you got a big fan club here on Capitol Hill. Thank you.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters from Mr. Atkins regarding his compliance with all necessary ethics requirements. Without objection, so ordered. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome everybody. Mr. Atkins, a number of years ago, Senator Kennedy and I teamed up to pass a law entitled Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act. It was designed to protect American investors and actually also American businesses by ensuring that foreign companies that list their shares on U.S. exchanges have to play by the same accounting standards as U.S. companies that list their shares on those exchanges. And at the time, Chinese companies had been playing by a whole different set of rules, which both put them at a competitive advantage, but also endangered American investors on those exchanges, especially less sophisticated investors. And the entity that is charged with making sure that Chinese companies play by the same rules, that they comply with American standards, is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, the PCAOB. So my question to you is, do you commit that if you're confirmed, you will preserve the PCAOB's important role in that mission?
Oh, well, thank you, Senator. The role is crucial. Accounting and auditing is really crucial, obviously, to investor protection and to the capital markets. So, yes, that function is by law delegated to the PCAOB, and so I'm going to ensure that it is not politicized anymore, and that it really focuses on its mission to protect investors and to follow those rules.
I appreciate that, because the reason I ask is I've been looking at Project 2025, and I see that you have a special mention in Project 2025 on a chapter that mentions the PCAOB. Is that right?
I participated in a couple of phone calls, but I didn't.
Well, they listed you as with a special mention in a chapter that recommends that the PCAOB be abolished. Are you in favor of abolishing the PCAOB?
Well, that's up to you all. It's part of the statute, and actually, it's not even part of the securities.
Just are you in favor of abolishing the PCAOB?
The function needs to be done by whether it's PCAOB or whether it's folded back into the SEC. The function is vital, and how best and most efficient it is achieved, I think.
So do you or do you not subscribe to the recommendation in this chapter of Project 2025 that the PCAOB be abolished?
Well, I think it's not in my power, it's up to you all. So, I mean, I would support whatever Congress.
So you do agree that neither you nor the president has the ability to unilaterally abolish the PCOB? Do you agree with that?
I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but.
Well, you just
it's
said it
not-
was the Congress, right? So I'm assuming from your answer that you agree that the president cannot unilaterally get rid of the PCOB. Is that your view?
It's part of, you have it in the statute, and so it's part of the
That
law.
seems to be there are lots of things that are in statute right now, Mr. Atkins, that the president has decided to ignore, which is why we have so many lawsuits filed about his abuse of the separation of powers. Mr. Molinaro, if you're confirmed, you'll be leading an agency that has about 700 employees at the beginning of President Trump's second term. But because of the actions taken by the Musk Doge operations and others, about 80 probationary employees were initially terminated. My understanding is many of them are now being brought back to the FTA because of court orders that found that those were illegal firings. Is that your understanding, that many of them are coming back now?
Only through public report, Senator.
Got it. And would you agree that haphazardly eliminating employees from the FTA, so for example, those in the Office of Transit Safety and Oversight could put people at risk?
I think, Senator, I can only offer what I've observed publicly. It's my expectation to enter the role with this force, obviously seeking to increase morale. But I assure you, just as Secretary Duffy asserted in his hearing, and I did earlier in my opening comments, public safety, not only the safety of the individual riders across America, workers, and the systems is a priority, and I'll seek to apply the law.
I appreciate that, because the infrastructure bill that passed, including a measure that I had introduced, the Transit Worker and Pedestrian Protection Act. So I look forward to working with you if you're confirmed. Thank you very much.
Look forward to the same, Senator.
Senator Kennedy, you are recognized.
Mr. Atkins, you were roommates with Senator Hagerty in law school.
Yes, sir.
Is it true that Hagerty has a tattoo of the Backstreet Boys on his lower back?
I wouldn't know. I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Hagerty, you know who Sam Bankman-Fried is, don't you? Or Mr. Atkins, sorry.
Yes.
He looks like the fourth runner-up in a John Belushi lookalike contest, doesn't he?
That's could be.
He's a crook, isn't he?
He's convicted and, yes, in jail.
And his parents were involved in his company, weren't they?
I guess by public reports.
Don't you think the SEC ought to do something about it?
Well, I look forward to getting to the SEC to find out what has happened.
But based on
in
what
the
you've
past.
read, they made millions of dollars off of their son's illegal activity. Don't you think they ought to be punished? Don't you think the American people have see that and wonder if there are two sets of standards?
Well, I like you, I'm concerned about those reports, but I
want
don't
you to
know.
be more than concerned.
Well, I need to
Now,
find out.
and when his parents did all this, they were both chaired professors at Stanford Law School, weren't they?
Apparently, yes.
Yeah. Has the SEC been investigating Stanford Law School for its involvement in this?
Yeah, I would know.
Didn't Sam Bankman-Fried's parents, who were involved in the fraud, make sizable donations to Stanford University?
Perhaps.
You don't know?
I don't know personally.
Did Stanford give the money back?
I would know that.
Well, Mr. Atkins, I want you to find out. And there shouldn't be two standards of law and punishment for people in America. And every time you come to this committee, I'm going to pounce on you like a ninja to find out what the SEC has done, because I don't think the SEC has done a damn thing.
Okay.
And I read in the paper where the Bankman-Frieds, all of them, are trying to get a pardon. They're crooks. And I expect the SEC to do something about it. If I'm the CEO of an American company and I want to sell some of my company's stocks, I've got to file an electronic report with the SEC that becomes public immediately, and then I've got to wait 2 days, don't I?
Yes.
If I'm the CEO of a Chinese company that's listed on an American exchange, I don't have to do that, do I?
Yeah, there are different rules for foreign.
Why?
Good question. Things have changed a lot since those rules were put in place.
Now, Senator Van Hollen and I have a bill. I begged Mr. Gensler to do something about it. I want something done about it. If I'm the CEO of a Chinese company and I want to sell, engage in insider trading, I have to notify the SEC, but there's no time limit. And I don't have to file electronically. I can send them a letter, and I don't have to wait. And CEOs of Chinese companies have done that, haven't they?
Yeah, I would.
I want you to find out. I expect you to find out. That's the second thing I'm going to pounce on you like a ninja on.
Okay.
A bunch of them, of these CEOs of Chinese companies listed on American exchanges have sold their stock, and the stock immediately went down, and the American investors had to bear the losses. $10 billion worth under the SEC's nose. I expect something to be done about it. Mr. Pettit, I understand where the president's coming from on tariffs, don't you?
Yes, Senator.
America's the wealthiest country in all of human history. 70% of our economy is driven by consumer demand, consumer purchases. So why not use our bargaining strength, our economy, to get foreign companies to build their plants in Louisiana? I get that. In the long run, theoretically it'll work. Somebody once said, in the long run, you're dead though, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Tell me what the short-term effects of these tariffs are. Already consumer expectations are going down like John Goodman on a seesaw. Can you tell me what the short-term effects will be? I'm over. Can
Senator-
you answer?
10 seconds.
Pretty please, sugar on top?
If confirmed, I look forward to working with the.
Answer my question.
It's difficult to assess the near-term impacts of the tariffs, but in the long
I know
run,
it's hard. That's why I'm asking you. You're an economist.
Senator, your time is up.
Damn, I had him nailed down. too.
He was wiggling, however, so Senator Cortez Masto.
I'm happy to follow through in your train of thought there, Senator Kennedy, because that was my question.
Bipartisanship.
Mr. Pettit, talk to me about these tariffs. You know, we have currently imposed tariffs on Canada. What's the short-term impact?
Thank you, Senator. The impact of tariffs in the short run may increase the prices of the imported goods, but the objective of these tariffs in the long run is to help incentivize more manufacturing here in the United States.
And if they impose more costs here for our companies, and companies pass that cost on to the consumers, which I have seen publicly they intend to do, is that higher cost for the American consumer? Higher prices?
In the short term, they could lead to higher prices on imported goods.
So you would agree with Canada's billboards that are in Nevada and across the country now that say tariffs are a tax on your grocery bill in the short term?
I'm not sure of the volume of imports of various produce and goods, but I would say that the intent of these tariffs is to help reshore. And
I know the intent. Let's talk about the short-term impacts. Would you agree, along with Canada, who has a billboard now in Nevada, tariffs are a tax on hardworking Americans? You just basically said that's the ultimate result. Would you agree?
I believe that the effect of tariffs is very different than a tax on Americans, but it could lead to higher prices on certain imported goods here in the United States.
To
yes.
Americans?
Yes, ma'am.
If the companies pass the cost on to the Americans?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you this. If you're confirmed as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, will you respect the independence of the bank regulators?
Thank you for the question. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the regulators who do operate independently, yes.
And you will respect their independence?
I will.
Okay, so explain to me if you can, because Secretary Besson has announced, and I think it was on March 6th in a speech, he stated something to the effect of our financial regulators singing in unison from the same song sheet is what he is looking for. We need our financial regulators singing in unison from the same song sheet. To be clear, this does not mean consolidation of agencies, but coordination via Treasury, such that our regulators work in parallel with each other and the industry. What does that mean?
Thank you, Senator. I believe, and not to speak on behalf of Secretary Besson, the intention of that statement was that we need to avoid the outcome of having regulators telling institutions different things, and so that institutions that are supervised by multiple federal regulators aren't torn between conflicting guidance.
So regulators should work in conjunction and parallel with the Treasury Department?
No, I think the objective here is to ensure that there isn't uncertainty in terms of which rules to follow across different agencies.
Okay. I'll be curious to see how this plays out. Mr. Molinaro, thanks for meeting with me. I really appreciate the conversation that we had in my office. One of the things we talked about was transparency. And you called out your own Metropolitan Transit Agency on a lack of transparency and accountability. Can you promise that as an administrator, you will provide the public and Congress transparency in job firings and federal funding freezes that are currently being ordered by the Trump administration and those employed with DOGE?
Senator, I was nearly convinced none of you noticed I was here. Obviously, Senator, I don't know the current impacts. My expectation and my commitment is to uphold the highest standard of accountability and transparency, and to work with your offices certainly to explain both impacts of previous and future decisions within the FTA.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me ask you this. Congress previously worked deliberately in a bipartisan way to pass the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And the bill authorized up to $108 billion for fiscal years 2022 and 2026 to support public transit. Will you commit to dispersing all of the already approved funding and the remaining funding consistent with how it was authorized by Congress?
Senator, and again, I do appreciate the time we spent together. I don't know the status of awarded and contracted grants. I did read, I think yesterday morning, that there is now some advancement and release of those dollars. As you know, and I said to you, and I'll privately will say publicly, the President and the Secretary have asked me to advocate on behalf of transit systems across this country and the riding public. And so my expectation is to advocate for the disbursement of contracted and obligated awards.
Thank you. And then finally, let me just ask you this. We talked a little bit about this, rural communities and the challenges that we see for transportation in rural communities. I know your House district covered vast counties in upstate New York, where my husband and his family are from, and you're familiar with the lack of transit access. Can you talk a little bit about not only the challenges you saw, but how you addressed it and what you intend to do?
In 10 seconds, I will tell you I value working with supporting rural and regional transit systems. Think of hubs and spokes, urban and village and city centers being the hub, those regional rural districts, rural transit systems being the spokes. It's important we connect them to move Americans and to grow the American economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you for stepping up and your willingness to serve the country. It's very, very appreciated. I'll start with you, Mr. Atkins. Man, you just have to be able to breathe and not be a complete raging lunatic, and you're going to be the greatest SEC commissioner compared to the last guy. I mean, congratulations on coming after Gary Gensler, who objectively probably was one of the stupidest people in government. I want to ask you a question because there were some comments about that I want to correct for the record around, you've met President Trump, right? You've had a chance to interact with him?
Yes, Senator, yes.
Is he the President of the United States?
Yes.
Is he in charge?
Yes.
Is there a co-president, or does President Trump make the decisions?
But he's the president, head of the executive branch.
Right. So there's no ambiguity in the White House as to who's in charge. It's Donald J. Trump, correct?
I hope so. There's no ambiguity.
And I just find it ironic that my Democrat colleagues like to say this whole talking point of Elon Musk. I thought you guys loved Elon. 70% of EVs are sold by Tesla. What a terrible breakup between the left and Elon Musk. I mean, I'm convinced Taylor Swift is going to write a song about this someday. But here's my question to you. Who was in charge for the last 4 years? Who was in charge of the last 4 years when we had no idea who a completely, clearly incompetent person was in the White House? It seems like the most important person in the White House was an auto pen. But moving beyond that, let's talk about the SEC for a second. Are you worried about what's going on with American companies having capital outflows to the Chinese-backed companies like corporate Amperex Technology Limited, a company that sounds very nice and obscure and Western? In reality, it's a fully owned company from the CCP. Are you concerned by that?
Well, Senator, I'm concerned about what I've read in the paper. Obviously, I'm not in the building yet and know what the SEC is seeing and doing about it. But I know that obviously the work that you all are doing in Congress, I think, is very important to her.
Well, I don't pretend to jump on you like a ninja, but if you could please take a look at making certain that you look at what we're doing to make certain that U.S. capital outflows don't go into that office. Shifting over to you, Mr. Molinaro, I do not want you to feel ignored at all. So let's talk transit for a second. Do you think it makes a lot of sense to spend 2-3 times as much money for electric buses than for ones that are run by, for example, renewable or compressed natural gas?
I appreciate the question, Senator. As I said in my opening comments and affirmed when I spoke with your staff, I do think that local and regional transit systems need to make purchasing decisions that make sense for them. And while I embrace all of the above energy approach, you're highlighting renewable energy sources are, in fact, a great way, as I mentioned in addressing the previous senator's question, of marrying the agricultural and rural economy with mass transit. And so while currently the law requires a certain distribution, if you will, of dollars for low and no emission vehicles, you all will debate and consider that through reauthorization. Our job, I think, is to really encourage local and regional transit systems to make the purchasing decisions that make sense for them.
Well, again, they certainly can make their own purchasing decisions, but not when they're billing the federal government 2 or 3 times what they can do with something else that certainly accomplishes the mission better. I've seen with my own eyes trucking companies and that put diesel generators to charge electric semis. That seems peak stupidity. Mr. Pettit, I'll move to you quickly because the chairman will electrocute me if I go over my time, and I don't want to be electrocuted. So let me ask you a question. We talked about tariffs, which is funny because I thought this was the banking committee, not the finance committee. But let me just clarify for a second on the situation in Canada. You have a family, and you have family members. Do you know anybody who's ever been killed as a result of fentanyl poisoning?
Not directly, but I have friends of friends who have been impacted by it.
Yeah, it's a life sentence.
Yes, sir.
Do you think that the President of the United States should do nothing? Like we should just continue to let 110,000 plus Americans die every single year of fentanyl poisoning?
I do not.
Do you think it's acceptable that Canada and Mexico allow that poison to come into this country?
No, sir.
So again, for 4 years, we did nothing. Actually, before that, for decades, we did nothing. And President Trump is simply saying to our partners, hey, we'll let you rip us off for $300 billion a year in a trade surplus, but please don't poison 110,000 Americans. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation. And I think when we look about tariffs, and it just shocks me that we sit here and have these conversations that don't take into account the empathy of what's going on in places like Ohio that's been ravaged by fentanyl. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, welcome. And Mr. Gould, the OCC is charged with the enforcement of the Military Lending Act on federally chartered banks. And will you commit to vigorous enforcement of this legislation, which protects our servicemen and women?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. As you know, the MLA bars lenders from charging service members in excess of 36% interest. And I feel that's a good standard, not just for members in uniform, but for every American. And in fact, as I understand, the OCC's supervisions insist that interest rates not go beyond 36% because doing so would be indicative of poor lending standards. Is that accurate?
Senator, I'd be happy to look into that if I am confirmed and get into the OCC.
Well, if that in fact is correct, then I would hope you could join me in urging that we apply that military standard to all the American people, and that we pass legislation with this body in the House to make 36% interest rate a cap on all lenders. But I will look forward to working with you on that. Mr. Atkins, private equity is growing exponentially. It's also becoming more widely available, not just to wealthy individuals, but to retail investors alike. In fact, the SEC just approved a exchange-traded fund containing private credit assets. So there is a possibility that very risky or illiquid assets are now being included for sale to retail consumers. So it raises the question of what transparency and investor protection should be in place for private equity or private market investments.
Well, thank you, Senator. And it was a pleasure to chat with you in your office here a few weeks ago. Well, the one thing about the public markets and ETFs and mutual funds is that they have to abide by diversification rules and those sorts of things, which is a key investor protection device for those sorts of things with diversity in there, so that that one bet or one investment won't take the whole thing down. So I think that's key, and there's a whole process by which the SEC and the staff approves these various offerings, and so I look forward to seeing what's at work in the SEC once if confirmed, and get there.
Just now, these private equity, private investment funds are growing. They're larger than some of the publicly capitalized companies that are regulated very rigorously by the SEC. And I think we're approaching a point where we have to have some regulation of these private equity enterprises, because if not, we could find ourselves in a situation where the public is buying illiquid assets, or I saw this as we went through the 2008 crisis, not with respect to investments, but with respect to housing. But let me move on, Mr. Atkins. Currently, the SEC has a pending case against Elon Musk for concealing his intentions while acquiring Twitter stock. And one outside commenter said, quote, a very serious securities violation. It seems to have saved Musk about $143 million. Mr. Musk is also the head of Doge, as we know, which has been borrowing into agencies and disrupting agencies. Given that the SEC is currently using its resources to enforce the law against Mr. Musk, what would you do if the Doge team showed up and Mr. Musk came knocking on your door?
Well, I don't know anything about the case other than what I've read in the paper, so obviously I can't speak to that. But as far as if there are people who can help with creating efficiencies in the agency or otherwise, I would definitely work with them. And as we'll be looking at things going on at the commission right now to make sure that taxpayer funds are being used properly and that the work of the commission is being done effectively and efficiently.
Would it be a surprise if the case against Mr. Musk was suddenly dropped?
I have no way to judge what the merits or lack thereof might be on that.
Thank you. And Mr. Molinaro, thank you for meeting on my office. My time's expired. Good luck.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Britt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your willingness to be here and your willingness to serve our country at the highest level. You all are up for very critical roles that affect the lives of all Americans, which is why it's very important that you all bring transparency and accountability to the agencies that you are going to serve. I'm not going to ask you all to comment on the past, but I do want to highlight a couple of the needs of change here. Over the last few years, we've had agencies that prioritized speedy regulation over thoughtful policy making, rushing into policy making without proper due diligence or justification. In fact, we had regulators sit in this room and our other committee hearing room in front of us, and one by one tell me that they believe the U.S. banking sector was the strongest and well-capitalized across the world. I agree. However, immediately, calling for higher and more regulation and higher capital standards right after that. I mean, I literally asked them after the 2023 banking failures, I said, did you use every tool in your toolbox to prevent this? Every single one of them walked down and said, I don't know, I'll get back to you. But then in quick response after that, they all said they needed more power and more authority to prevent that in the future. That is absolutely not how this should work, and it's completely and totally unacceptable. One of the things we also must reinstate is proper regulatory tailoring. So I was able to sit down with Senator Crapo right after these failures and ask him about 2155. My first question is for you, Mr. Gould, former staffer to former staffer. Can you speak to the purpose of 2155 and how a balanced regulatory framework actually promotes stability and growth? Because it is my belief, whether it's capital, liquidity, operational risk management, an Alabama bank with less than $1 billion in assets should not be subject to the same threshold as a $3 trillion bank. And I'd probably say the same for a $150 billion bank. And I think there's purposeness in this, and I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, thank you very much for the question. It is certainly the case that not all banks' business models look the same or have the same risks. And as a result, they should not be treated the same way, whether as a matter of regulation or as a matter of supervision. If we want to preserve a diverse banking sector, which is to say a sector in which we have banks that are smallest banks, community banks serving their local communities, to the largest of banks and everything in between, Senator, we need to ensure that we, the regulators, and if confirmed, would be the comptroller, adhere to both the letter of the Economic Growth Act as well as the spirit of it in making sure that we are bringing common sense tailoring to both bank supervision and bank regulation.
Thank you for that commitment. Also, in the rulemaking that we've seen over the last couple of years, it created significant confusion and compliance costs to some of our smallest banks, our community banks, and our businesses in rural America and our main streets that make our states so great. Mr. Pettit, this question is for you. In your role of overseeing bank policy, will you commit to regular communication with community bank sector to ensure that the rules that are going to be considered are taking a look at their unique business model? What is the cumulative impact of these things? What is the actual enforcement mechanism? What is this going to cost? How is this going to affect them and their relationship banking? Will you commit to looking at that before moving forward?
Yes, Senator, if confirmed, I've seen firsthand the role that community banks play in adding to the breadth of our banking system. They reach areas in states like Tennessee and Alabama that would be otherwise unbanked. So I look forward to working with them if confirmed.
Thank you, Mr. Pettit. I only have a minute left and I have two more questions. Shifting gears, I want to touch on the SEC Consolidated Audit Trail, or CAT. The massive data collection poses serious security and privacy risk for consumers. I am pleased that the agency has recently halted the CAT collection of certain personal identifiable information. However, I still have concerns that the data that's already been collected and stored within CAT creates a target for bad actors. Mr. Atkins, will you commit to reevaluating both the necessity of CAT and whether adequate protections are in place to safeguard that data that has already been collected?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I look forward to your leadership on that. And Congressman Molinaro, I see your former colleagues flooding in from the back. You have just immense support from both sides of the aisle and everyone who's had an opportunity to work with you. I am excited for your leadership in this new role. When you said we want to help America move forward, I couldn't agree more. One of the things we see in Alabama is having many rural communities. Sometimes that takes extra effort and extra thought. Do you have any thing you want to add or talk about with regards to how we incorporate rural communities into your plans?
Sure, critically important. Obviously, many of your constituents need to move within their communities, but to other communities for employment. I think the FTA can lean in with technical support, working with regional and smaller transit agencies to provide back office support, really to grow their capacity. But we look forward to getting on the ground, working with you, your staff, and local officials to assist in meeting the needs of rural communities.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair Scott and Ranking Member. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. I will actually follow up on the question that my colleague, Senator Britt, just asked about rural transit. Mr. Congressman Molinaro, you and I spoke about this just yesterday afternoon. So I appreciate that question. So the FTA is going to be responsible for lots of grants and projects that are already in the pipeline. Things are already happening, and contractors have ordered materials, construction is in process, we've got engineers and electricians and the whole 9 yards showing up to work. And my question is, concern about what the administration has been doing to pause or halt or sometimes cancel projects, even projects that are across all other agencies that are already in process. So can you just talk about how you would approach this leading FTA, and are you able to commit that the funds that we authorize through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, that those projects will keep moving and the funds keep flowing?
First, Senator, thank you for the time yesterday, and I think it was Graham. I hope Graham had a whirlwind of a day shadowing you. As I said yesterday, I don't know the status of the individual grants, but it is my commitment, as the President has asked and Secretary Duffy expects, I will continue to advocate for the release of dollars and certainly meeting the contractual obligations of the FTA. As I noted a few moments ago, I read yesterday, and this is the only information I have, public notice that some of those grant projects are now moving forward. I believe congressionally directed dollars are starting to flow. And so my commitment to you is to work with you and your team to advocate for and hopefully move effectively those dollars. And I would offer, I'm sorry, it is critically important, and I understand the reality that in order to move massive infrastructure projects and even small transit projects, that commitment from appropriation to ultimate obligation and contract is important to adhere to.
That's right. I think that's important. And of course, at the end of the day, if you have small rural transit agencies that are in the midst of a project and then that project gets held up because the federal government is just money out of the pockets of my constituents who are going to have to cover the costs other ways. And for Minnesota, of course, we send more money to the government than we get back. So this is a matter of great interest. Appreciate the conversation we had yesterday. Mr. Atkins, I want to talk to you about private funds. There's growing evidence that private fund managers are taking advantage of their unregistered status. 2022, the SEC warned that managers are not disclosing the full fees and expenses that their investors are paying and are using cherry-picked track records to artificially inflate their fund's performance. And in December, the Wall Street Journal reported that private markets, as a quote, come at the cost of higher fees, greater risk, more conflicts of interest, and less disclosure. And that matters because it means that workers' pension plans or retirement accounts get saddled with those higher fees. So, Mr. Atkins, do you agree that private fund managers are charging higher fees and expenses to their investors than their public market counterparts?
Senator, there's a whole range of fees that are done, but I would, to your point there, as far as the not being truthful in disclosure, 10b applies to whether it's a public or private security. So that, I think, is one way to protect investors if there be any bad disclosure in that way.
So you're saying that investors should be protected by making sure that they know what those fees are going to be in advance?
These are accredited investors and people who are not retail investors, and so they have the means to do investigation. But if the disclosures are incorrect, or materially incorrect, then that's actionable.
So the typical management fee for a private fund can be 4 times higher than the annual fee for a mutual fund, and that doesn't even include the profits, of course, that those fund managers keep for themselves, which can push up to 20%. And multiple studies have found that private funds barely, I should say, beat the stock market if they do at all. Do you think that private fund managers, what's your take on what we ought to be doing to make sure that this is fair for people?
Well, I think people who are investing in these sorts of funds, are more sophisticated in general than others, or they have the ability to hire advisors, and so they don't need to pay. There's like other alternatives. You don't necessarily need to invest in those types of instruments.
I think this is a matter of concern, and I think that as these funds become, it's the pensions of my constituents that are in these funds, and it's not a good thing.
Well, I'm happy to work with you on that.
Thank you.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Brother Chairman. To the nominees, welcome to all of you and your families present, and congratulations on your nominations. Mr. Atkins, thank you for meeting with me a while ago in my office. And I'd like to follow up on our discussion, specifically regarding the 2008 financial crisis, which devastated millions of Americans. Millions of Americans, as you know, lost their jobs, families lost their homes, seniors lost their retirement savings. And instead of families getting the help they needed, Americans saw Wall Street get bailed out. You served as a commissioner on the Securities and Exchange Commission under President Bush during the lead up to the crisis from 2002 to 2008, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In 2009, you were appointed to serve on the Congressional Oversight Panel for TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program, which Ranking Member Warren chaired, and which oversaw the federal government's response to the financial crisis. When we met a few weeks ago in my office, one of the questions you might recall that I asked, based on your experience, what did you learn from the financial crisis? And you spoke in your answer about the overregulation of banks and the financial sector. Can you share more on that view?
Well, thank you, Senator. Well, there are many causes to that financial crisis, and obviously it was really awful. But what troubles me is that some of the key factors to it are still unaddressed, and that is the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's activities in the marketplace, and how that can potentially create problems in the future, similar to what went on 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So in the meantime, though, as far as what the SEC is doing, I look forward to being in the building to figure out what the examinations show with respect to the.
What do you think was the big takeaway
from
in terms of lessons learned from the crisis?
Well, I think that, one is over-leveraging is obviously not a good, sound business practice. And I think because of a lot of the distractions that went on during that time from the leadership at the SEC, from the chairman and others, and rulemaking that were not central to the situation at the time, I think that helped to create distraction from the SEC.
One of the things that struck me by your answer in my office, and you seem to be elaborating on that as you talk about distractions, was that you felt that when I asked you, what was the big takeaway? You said overregulation. Is that an accurate characterization of your view that the big problem was overregulation that led to the 2008 financial crisis?
I didn't know about overregulation. I don't recall saying that, but I think misregulation. I think focusing on the wrong things was what helped to create that crisis. Being distracted by ancillary issues and not focused on what's really important to the marketplace.
Do you think less regulation would have helped?
I think it was misregulation, frankly. Wasted resources and not focused on the actual problems that were there.
So do you think that we were too hard on the banks?
Well, the SEC, banks or securities firms, I think, again, the distortions that were created through the regulatory scheme at the time helped to distract the examiners.
So in some ways we were too hard on the banks.
No, I don't know about too hard, but just, again, focusing.
I'm asking because, you know, there are communities in Atlanta, especially communities and folks that I know and people in my church that still haven't recovered. I mean, we saw a huge transfer of wealth as a result of this crisis. The banks got bailed out, Wall Street got bailed out, but consumers didn't get bailed out. And often and I'm asking because you're the nominee at the SEC, and I'm just trying to get an understanding of what you think we need to do differently. Let me press on. Speaking of going easy on Wall Street, you've previously been critical of monetary fines against companies charged with fraud. If confirmed, will the SEC continue to fine companies that break the law?
Absolutely, but obviously depends on the situation. And when I was there, the commission adopted a bipartisan statement on corporate penalties.
Do you have an issue with penalties as a way of making sure that they comply with the law?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Atkins, I wanted to just start with you. You know, I know that there was mention earlier about the consolidated audit trail. You know, I guess I just wanted to ask you, do you agree that the prospects of foreign companies manipulating our market presents a national security threat?
Yes, and especially in a day of AI and everything else.
So I think hopefully all of us can agree upon that. So I guess I wanted to ask, you know, the consolidated audit trail, CAT, it's really our only tool that tracks market manipulation across companies, particularly in foreign companies. What is your thoughts on whether or not we should continue on with CAT?
Well, so the consolidated, I look forward to looking into what the status of that whole situation is. It's obviously cost a lot of money and a lot of effort, both by the SEC, but then also with respect to market participants. So is it well coordinated and well calibrated to meet the needs that it's stated to, you know, hopefully meet? So I think it needs to be reviewed.
So you don't have a position right now that it should be taken away?
Now, I need to look at what the status is. I only know what I read in the newspaper. But FINRA's obviously involved in that, the SEC, and then the exchanges. A lot of people have spent a lot of money. I hope it's towards a good, end. But that's what I intend to find out should I be confirmed.
Well, look, the reason why I raised this is because I know you were listed as a special contributor to that portion of the Project 2025 Project 2025 compilation there, which explicitly calls for the termination of the Consolidated Audit Trail program. So I guess I just wanted your response. Do you then disagree with what you saw in Project 2025 talking about this?
Well, I participated in a call or two on that, so I wasn't involved with drafting. And so again, I commit to looking at the situation the way it is now, what the plans are, how efficient it is, what the costs are going to be. They've ballooned a lot from what it started out, and even the mission of it has kind of veered off from the way it was stated from the folks who voted on it back originally. So I think we, like with anything else, things change over time, and I think we need to look to see if it's going to be focused on the mission that it's trying to solve.
Well, that's a helpful clarification, because I wanted to get it since I was concerned, because it just seemed like, look, you know, this is an important tool. You know, it's important for us to be able to fight back against that type of manipulation that could occur when it comes to our markets. Something that we've seen, and when we see sort of a rise of, you know, greater global competition, whether, you know, concerns about Chinese companies or others trying to manipulate. So please, you know, that is something that I urge you, if you're confirmed, to prioritize and to do everything we can to make sure that these tools are in place. And I personally think that the CAP program has been helpful, is important, and is really our only tool when it comes to this. So I just wanted to emphasize that in particular. Mr. Molinaro, I just wanted to be able to turn to you, just be able to ask, you know, when it comes to the FTA, just what your thoughts are in terms of how we consider adequately staffing that at a time when we've seen efforts across this administration to be able to decrease staff. In particular, I was very concerned about just the lack of protections for probationary employees in terms of how they were terminated at FTA. I'd like your response to that.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, and I appreciate the question very much, and our time together, I do want you to know I spent some time talking with Chris Caluri at New Jersey Transit. I don't know the status of those hiring and dismissal decisions. I only know what I've read. Having spent most of my life in local government, I can tell you on any given day, I would wake up and the federal or state government would impose some mandate that would require us to do more with less. My goal is to show respect to this career staff. I have a great deal of appreciation, admiration for them, assess the impact of those decisions, and to really demand and to work with the team to deliver the highest results with the team that's been presented to me.
Well, as we talked about when we had a chance, I mean, right now I think there's no one in this country that thinks that what we're doing on transit is enough. There's more that we need to continue to push on. And for us to be able to meet that moment and supercharge this, I really think that we need to understand and be willing to take those types of investments. You and I talked about it as a national priority, and I think we should prioritize that expertise that can be brought by some of these public servants.
We share that interest, Senator.
I'll yield back.
Thank you, sir. Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Warren. I want to start off by saying that for the nominees that are before us, your responsibilities are pivotal, not just for our country, but for the world. And I feel it's unfortunate that you did not each get the requisite time that was commensurate with how important your positions are. I will ask you some questions for the record so that you are not all left out. But right now, I want to focus my questions on you, Mr. Atkins. I'm deeply concerned about your record. And even in the course of this hearing, when asked about why the financial crisis happened, I have here SEC distractions. I have ancillary issues. Instead of the question when it was posed to you, was there overregulation? You said misregulation. You mentioned Fannie and Freddie. Was there anything that you got wrong?
Well, Senator, I was one of 5 commissioners, and obviously I was not in charge. And, during that time, there were things that I disagreed with, which when I was talking about distractions, I really believe that some of the things that then chairman was pushing and that he had a majority on, I do think that it distracted the staff from focusing on the real problems of over-leveraging in the securities industry, which, contributed to Bear Stearns issue, and then the underlying issues of Fannie and Freddie, where the securitization of subprime mortgages and the distortions that did to the marketplace were really critical. And with the Congressional Oversight Panel.
But was there anything that you got wrong? When you look back, is there something you would have done differently?
Well, I think as far as looking at the over-leveraging and what the staff did or did not do, and I think that that's one thing that I believe the SEC should have been more on top of.
Did you vote for the Consolidated Supervised Entity Program?
I did. It was a unanimous vote by the commission, but I did ask the crucial question, do you, the staff, have enough resources to effectively take on that burden? And I was assured by the staff and the chairman, yes, and I think that was part of the problem.
I think looking back, we know that this allowed the 5 large investment banks to extremely leverage positions in mortgage-backed securities that ultimately failed and bankrupted or seriously destabilized those firms. And the SEC's Inspector General determined that this program and the poor oversight of these banks by the SEC contributed to the crisis. And as Senator Warnock said, we saw people lose their homes, people lose their jobs and their retirement savings. I hope that we will learn some lessons. Right now, the administration isn't really waiting to deregulate. It's kind of dismantling day-by-day operations. It's my understanding that the SEC has shuttered regional offices, including the Philadelphia office that serves Delaware, and offered buyouts, maybe $50,000 for people to resign or retire. Do you agree with shuttering these regional offices?
Well, Senator, it's been now 15 years since I was at the agency, so I don't really know what the management is like, or what the efficiency is, or how best to make sure that we're using taxpayer money.
Did you think they were overstaffed when you were there?
Well, I don't really remember, and I wasn't. Again, the commissioners don't have influence really over the HR part of the agency. So, as chairman coming in, that will be on my desk.
I think one of the big concerns is that without the staff, it's hard to have oversight. A lot of folks rely on the SEC, the no action letters, for example, businesses that are trying to process an IPO. And so I think it's going to be vitally important that there actually be people there that can do the work.
Yeah, they are vital.
Very vital. Lastly, I would just say, as a person coming from a state where the financial sector is vitally important, your jobs are important. We have 6 CDFIs in our state. We have community bank. And so these banks, these institutions support small businesses, they support our communities. And so I hope that there will still be a strong focus on them as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, ma'am. Senator Alsobrooks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member Warren as well, and to all of the nominees, congratulations on your nominations, and thanks for being here today. I'm going to try to quickly get through of just 4 questions, and I agree with my colleague that the work we're here to discuss today literally will undergird the economic success of our country. So these are very, very important questions. Regarding transit, I want to start with Congressman Molinaro. And talk about transit, which has traditionally been bipartisan. That's the approach that's been taken toward transit, advancing transit priorities. And I look forward to working with this committee and with you if confirmed. The first question is regarding discretionary federal grants that are so important and provide critical funding for public transit projects, and they supplement often the formulas that many of the states use, like Maryland. But unlike formula funding, these competitive grants allow local and regional transit agencies and their partners to secure additional resources for projects that address specific community needs. So I want to list a few of these important programs, including the Capital Investment Grants Program, the Buses and Bus Facilities Program, the Low or No Emission Program, and the Better Utilizing Investments to Leverage Development, the BUILD Program, and ask if you are confirmed, would you advocate for robust funding for these important programs?
First, Senator, the answer is yes. Second, I would offer to you, having served in local government, I truly understand the value of making sure that those additional dollars, while discretionary, still written into statute, are available to regional and smaller transit organizations. And I would just say, while mayor was the title I enjoyed the most, county executive is one where I got done the most. So it's nice to be with you today.
Thank you so much. The second question, Mr. Congressman, is regarding the Transit Workers Union and the work that they do. I know that you mentioned just a few moments ago the great respect that you have for our civil servants. And as you know, we've seen, it's no secret, many of them are my constituents. And as you are aware, there have been so many firings and such that have happened really unceremoniously. So I just want to ask you, are you aware of any plans to fire FTE employees if you are confirmed?
There's no way that I would know that, so I don't. But I would reaffirm my commitment to both the career staff, but also to the transit workers whose safety and lives are valuable in moving Americans. And we'll be working together with you and your staff to address, I know, the concerns that you have for transit workers in particular.
Well, do you support then the reducing of the workforce there? I know that you are not maybe aware at the moment, but are you supportive of reducing the FTA workforce?
Again, I'm going to start, should I be given the honor of serving, with those decisions having been made. I will certainly advocate for the workforce and for the work that they do. As I said, as a local government official, on any given day, we would have to wake up to do more with less. That's the expectation. But you have my commitment to advocate for not only the agency, but the transit organizations and the people who rely on those transit opportunities across America.
Thank you. Let me just go quickly. I see the time is tolling. Mr. Atkins, want to ask you quickly. You were questioned just a moment ago regarding a case that is happening right now, and acting SEC Chairman Mark Uyeda effectively asked SEC staff for a loyalty pledge when SEC staff were considering an enforcement action against Elon Musk for failing to disclose vital information about Twitter's stock price. And I hope you can just answer really quickly a yes or no. Will you commit to not allowing any political influence from the White House or the Department of Government Efficiency on the SEC's supervisory and enforcement decisions against companies?
Well, I think we should call the shots as they are, and I don't believe in any sort of political
influence. So you would oppose any political interference?
I just
in
don't
those
think
decisions?
there will be any when I'm chairman.
Okay, but if there is, you will oppose it. And will you commit also to resisting any effort by DOJ to ignore the congressional direction regarding staffing and funding for each division because you recognize that that funding is set by Congress?
Well, I will work with Congress and I will see what the situation is there and take suggestions wherever they may come from, but it'll ultimately be my decision.
Okay, and finally, Mr. Pettit, just very quickly, I just want to ask you also whether you agree. Secretary Scott Bessent recently said the CDFIs are a key component supporting Main Street America. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Senator, I do. I've witnessed firsthand in my role here in the Senate the role that CDFIs play in both rural and urban communities.
Thank you. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Atkins, manufacturing relies on intensive capital investment to build plants, buy equipment, and develop technology, but capital investment available to companies big and small has stagnated in recent years. The Jobs Act, which was signed into law a decade ago, made it easier for companies to sell stock, but there is still a huge regulatory burden on companies that are trying to go public. How can the SEC reduce that regulatory burden?
Well, Senator, there are fewer, 30% or so fewer public companies today than 30 years ago. And a lot of that, and very much fewer new companies coming in through IPOs. And so a lot of that is the regulatory burden. A lot of that is the litigation issue, torts, lawsuits, and that sort of thing. So I think all of that needs to be focused on because that is hurting our capital markets. It's hurting the ability for young companies to get capital. They then rely, of course, on the private markets because the public markets are dysfunctional. So we need
Any ideas
to
on
turn
what SEC can do about it?
Well, I
Or
think
what we can do to work with you to scale that back?
Well, I think part of the problem is that the SEC never fully implemented the Jobs Act. So that's, as you referenced to that. And so I think we need to look at that and re-examine it and work with you all in Congress to maybe have some changes to statutes that could then help turbocharge the new issue market.
Now, on that note, how can we encourage more of the kind of capital investment that will help American companies compete against China's manufacturing economy?
Well, I think, again, I mean, there's a lot of capital out there, but it's just not coming into the public markets because of all of the roadblocks to it, the regulatory and other sorts of roadblocks. And so if we can streamline that and then have encourage people to utilize the public markets, I think that'll be for the better.
I had Mr. Chairman, two other committee hearings going on, so I might have missed some of this conversation, but and you might have already talked about this, but as you know, the last SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, was a big fan of the so-called ESG investing, and he pressured Wall Street to adopt it. And this is basically an attempt to force regular people like who I represent, Hoosiers, hardworking Hoosiers who I represent at home, to invest in companies that promote left-wing social causes that they often disagree with instead of companies that build and make great things and sustain this American economy. Do you think ESG investment makes America's economy stronger, and why or why not?
Well, I want to get politics out of the financial markets and out of how the SEC, interacts with the financial markets. And unfortunately, there were some out there who are using other people's money to try to influence corporations through the distortions of the corporate governance process and that sort of thing. So that will end, and we will have protections in place so that money managers and others will be focused on actual investment strategy and not on politics.
I look forward to working with you on that. And on that note, I mean, how can we encourage investors to fund companies that actually make things?
Fund
actually make invest in companies that actually make things and build things. And I think about the manufacturing economy in Indiana. We're the #1 manufacturing state per capita in the country. And what can we do to promote investors to invest there rather than in woke causes? And I don't know if that makes sense, but it seems like we want investors to invest in companies that do and make things, not in other social causes.
Well, I think some of that is maybe some of the distortions and the ways some of these money managers have sold products. But I think ultimately the marketplace, investors themselves, you've seen a whole shift here recently away from those sorts of funds that you're talking about into more nuts and bolts types of things. And I think that's good for America and good for our economy.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thanks, Senator. That concludes the questions and answers portion of today's hearing. I'd like to thank our nominees for testifying before the committee today, and thank you for your willingness to serve our country. For senators, all follow-on questions for the record must be submitted by noon tomorrow, Friday, March 28th. And for our witnesses, please respond by Monday, March 31st at noon as well to the written questions you receive in order to facilitate this committee promptly processing your nominations. With that, this hearing is adjourned.